Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of Love Isn't Enough. Today, John and I are going to be talking about how to communicate your needs to your partner and, as the partner hearing the needs, how to receive them and how to be able to implement new patterns of communication where you both feel heard, and ultimately that will make you feel more connected.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you're absolutely right.
You seem like you have a lot to say on the topic already.
I have very little to say.
Is that your challenge in communicating your needs, or?
That is, I'm trying to figure out how to communicate my needs. I have the need to be silent.
Oh, well, that's not going to work for recording right now. So
Good.
you can meet that need later, love. Okay, so maybe let's start with looking at what most couples struggle with before we offer how to fix it. So maybe we can start with our own relationship challenges around communicating that we used to have, not now.
I'm confused. I don't have any relationship challenges.
You're in a very strange mood right now.
I am. It's late. My throat hurts. I'm wet and cranky.
Oh, part of that sounded good. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to you, John. Let's talk about earlier in our relationship. What were some of the issues you had in communicating to me what you were feeling, what you were needing?
Well, I think early on I was having a hard time communicating some of my needs to you. I think early on I had a hard time putting my needs into words. And then when I finally did put them into words, my experience was that they weren't received well. That there was defensiveness, and it was hard for you to hear me.
Was that all the time?
No, just in some things. And the most difficult areas. Well,
and I think that's the case for so many couples, right? The most difficult things to communicate are going to be the most difficult to receive, because I know for me, when you would share things around your needs and I couldn't hear them well, I felt embarrassed. I felt mad at myself for not being able to hear you.
You too, huh?
Oh yeah, I had that shame there.
Well, and full disclosure, you were great about, I don't know, 90% of the things that I brought up.
Yeah.
So it was just a few things.
Right. And usually life is easy when it's easy. It's more about what do we do when it's no longer easy and we feel stuck, because then what gets the pattern going for couples is we're like, fuck it, I'm not going to bring up anything then.
Right. And that's what you've said repeatedly. You don't want to get to that point, which I absolutely agree.
Yeah. For me, the things that I would have struggled with telling you were times that you hurt my feelings. Even if it was like something completely innocuous and unintentional, I would walk on eggshells around expressing, hey, what you did just hurt my feelings, because that would tend to spiral us into like that anxious avoidant dance in which you would shut down and withdraw. And then I'd get anxious and start to rescue you. And then I would rescue you out of your hurt feelings based on what my original hurt feelings were. And then the repair was around getting you to regulate. And then my needs, I felt like, weren't getting heard.
Yeah. And sorry about that. And
Thank you.
I think that's a very common pattern.
Right.
And I think in that direction too, right, where the male is really emotionally sensitive, whether or not they're aware of it. I think most aren't aware of it. But, you know, they do something that disappoints or hurts their partner. Their partner says, hey, this hurts my feelings. And then, like, I know I would go to beating myself up and ultimately at times even shame.
Right.
And then I couldn't pull myself out of my own emotional ditch. And so you felt the need to come in and try and help me out, which is backwards from how it's supposed to be.
Well, I am an empath, and when you would get shut down, I would feel bad. And then I would be in this kind of double bind of feeling bad for the original thing that hurt my feelings, and then bad that what I said hurt your feelings. And as you know, someone who didn't know how to sit in discomfort, I wanted to rescue you from that, but I didn't know how to rescue myself from that. It felt easier to push my own stuff aside at that point, which is ironic because the initial stuff I didn't want to push aside. The initial hurt I wanted to share, but it was a spiral.
Yeah. And it was a tough one to get out of. And I think we got stuck in it for a couple of years.
Yeah. So what would you say for you became easier on communicating what you needed to share that I really needed to hear differently?
Well, let's go back. And I mean, do you want to talk about how we got out of that?
Sure.
dance,
Yeah.
since we're on that one. And I think the first step was awareness,
Yeah.
just the realization that, oh, this is the pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And then, with practice, you can see the pattern maybe right after you were in the pattern. And
Mm-hmm.
then when you're in the pattern, you can see the pattern.
Right.
And I think that was really helpful. I think one of the things that helped me out was doing some internal family systems work with myself, with that hurt 5-year-old in me that, I think would go to emotional overwhelm and shame and maybe self-loathing, when I would disappoint my mom, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and things would be blamed on me. And I think there was an emotional carryover to when I would disappoint you.
Right.
So
And
I tried to heal that inner child.
so again, I mean,
And
like
I think I did ultimately.
like we always say, it's the joint, what's the joint process, I should say, of doing the individual work as well as the relational work. Because in order to access the better relational communication between the two of us, I think we both had to look at what was underneath our dynamics there.
When I think that's a great example for us where I knew what to do. I just couldn't access the tools when I was flooded in those moments.
So how did you get unflooded? Because most people don't even know what it means to be flooded, let alone awareness of when it's happening, let alone how to get out of it.
Well, flooded is when, your sympathetic nervous system takes over and you get in fight, flight, freeze. And, for me, I would go to anger was probably the most easiest emotion to recognize. Mm-hmm. And so then I would shut down because I didn't want to say anything in anger that was going to hurt your feelings, which kind of cracks me up because it's a great rationalization and it's true. At one level, I was trying not to hurt you, and yet at another level, from your perspective, it looked like, and it was, Stonewall. Yeah. So I was just shutting an iron curtain on the conversation and just like, we're done here unilaterally, mm-hmm. which felt to you like being abandoned, if I remember correctly.
100%. Yes.
And so I had to recognize what it was. I also had to recognize that shame was involved because that was kind of a game changer for me. And the way I recognized shame was after the fact. I realized that there was a couple of thoughts in my head in those moments that sounded like she'd be better off without me, or I'm just no good at this relationship thing. Mm-hmm. And, the extension of that is I'm better off alone. But the shame piece of that is I'm unworthy of love, connection, and belonging.
Right.
Which is completely untrue, but in the moment feels true.
Right. And no matter how much I told you were worthy, I couldn't heal that wound for you.
Didn't matter. Yeah, it wasn't about you. That was stuff that was really old. It was a pattern that existed in my life in every relationship I've been in, and was something that embarrassed me because it was one of those situations where I was unable to manage myself emotionally. And that always frustrates me. And so what did I do? I listened. I mean, one of the things that were key for me, I think, was listening to No Bad Parts on audiobook by Dick Schwartz.
Right.
And doing some of the exercises that he lays out in the book, and going in and talking with that 5-year-old part of me, and reassuring him that he's safe and loved and worthy, renegotiating the role so that he didn't have to take over that defensive strategy that he has been using since he was 5 to protect all of me. Mm-hmm. And kind of relieving him of that burden and allowing my wise adult self to take over in those moments rather than him.
Right. So basically what you're saying, to simplify it, is when I would name my hurt, that 5-year-old self rose to the surface.
Yeah. And came out and threw out his one defense that he's used his whole life to keep us safe. Yeah.
Right. And I'm trying to think back in those moments of what did I really do to start hearing you? Well, I think when you broke up with me, I really woke up. I think I think there might have been a handful of things that led to the breakup, but an accumulation of paper cuts of not feeling heard was definitely top of the list.
Yeah, which is ironic because that was your deepest need.
Was to be heard.
Seen, heard, and validated.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that.
I forgive you.
Thank you. Well, and I think, in order to really effectively hear one another, we've got to put aside our own shit. It's, to hear your partner means to fully be open that their experience is real, valid, and true, regardless.
Yeah, and I think and this takes some practice. I think partly it's about taking off the armor, letting your guard down, being open and staying open to your partner and their influence and what they're saying. And I know at times for us, at least for me, it was hard because one of the hardest things for me was when I would hurt you. And it didn't have to be intentional. Usually it wasn't. I don't
Right.
think it was ever intentional, but I discovered that I hate to hurt you. I hate to disappoint you. And that was one of the dynamics I think that led to the most difficulty for me was when I
Mm-hmm.
let you down. And I've talked to a lot of men about that and said, just be aware that that might be the case for you.
Right. And for you to start to hear me, the biggest shift was not being defensive
Mm-hmm.
in listening, which is was so much easier said than done and requires a lot of emotional regulation to not get defensive if you start to feel that nervous system turn on.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that I'm 57 and I think I only started practicing non-defensive listening within the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of astounding to me. And to me, it's a game changer.
Oh, well, for me, it was amazing to be able to hear your defensive responses.
Well, let's talk about that one where I gave you permission. I like how you put it. You're like, John gave me permission to get angry with him, but he also gave me a lot of reason to be angry
Oh,
with him.
you gave me plenty of reason to be angry with you,
But
love.
let's talk about that because I think that's a really good example where I said, I give you permission to unload on me and let me have
So
your anger.
yeah, so let me back up. I think I want you've given a lot of context in what was your challenge and how you overcame that. And I think I want to give a little context in where
You're
I
very good at
was.
context.
I am. I want to put things in context. And I I was always afraid, like my biggest fear was abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
And I
And it was
understand.
no small fear
No, it was
because
no.
there's trauma in there as well.
Well, and I was just going to say, some of that fear was based in reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't just what ifs in my life. And it was rooted in at 10 years old, my dad commits suicide. Prior to that, at 3 years old, my parents divorced. I saw my dad very infrequently, especially the last 2.5 years of his life. I only saw him twice a year. And in my family of origin, my mom's parents were killed in a car accident when my mom was 16. They were hit by a drunk driver. My mom was the only survivor of the accident. Her parents instantly died, and she became caretaker to her two younger brothers, and her immigrant Russian grandparents moved in, but she was the caretaker. And so
loss was a real thing in your
loss was
family.
real. Like in my worldview, people die unexpectedly or actually by choice. So people leaving was not just oh, I'm afraid you might leave me.
Hypothetical.
It wasn't a hypothetical. And so I think my nervous system, when I got fearful around a potential abandonment, my nervous system did go into overdrive that was unrelated or disproportionate
Mm-hmm.
to the trigger. So, what that looked like for me was often afraid of speaking up for fear that I was too much and that what I had to say would be too much for someone to handle. And therefore, they'd leave me.
I really like the idea of us feeling either too much or not enough. And sometimes
Both
we
at the
can be
same.
both.
Well, and I mean, what you described, how you didn't feel worthy of being in a relationship, that was you feeling not enough.
Not enough. And you felt too much.
And I felt like I was too much. And ironically, the thing that made me feel like I was too much was when I had emotion about something. And ironically, the thing that made you feel not enough was having emotion about something. So if we can all just agree that having emotion does not make you not enough for too much, then we could all just actually communicate a lot easier.
Just so you all know, Joree and I joke about that, where, when we have moments when our emotion takes over and we are struggling to manage our own emotions, we'll say something like, fucking humanity.
God, being human.
Because it pisses us off to be human sometimes. It's frustrating.
It's really frustrating. And I think what we've done a really good job of laughing about that is normalizing it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we normalize it, then we can deal with it much better when it arises. And we don't have to feel so stuck in retreating to those old patterns that we know do not work.
Yeah.
So that was the context of where I was coming from. And, I think for what shifted was, which is really ironic. So let me just, for greater context of being ironic, my biggest fear was that you were going to leave me. And then you did repeatedly during 6 months of being on and off, and then finally getting broken up with. So it wasn't just a fear anymore, because I no longer could trust when you'd say, I'm not going anywhere. I'm just need time to cool off. But I'm like, but you have.
Mm-hmm.
So that trust took time to rebuild, and we can have a whole nother episode on that. But once I realized you weren't going anywhere, and I think I realized that truly after our breakup and you coming back to me and recognizing I don't want to live without you again, because that fucking sucked and we were miserable and we sucked at being broken up. And that's when we knew, like, we better change our patterns. Otherwise we're going to end up here again. And we didn't want to be there again.
Mm-hmm. It was too painful.
Oh, it was the worst pain I've ever experienced. And so with that, in which we both acknowledged the patterns we had been stuck in, and we committed to doing it differently. One of the things was you giving me permission to get angry, because anger was one of those emotions that I had never, ever, ever, ever expressed.
When I recognized at some point in our relationship that you just didn't get angry. And there was times I was like, why is she not getting angry with this person or these people? And
did you ever wonder why I didn't get angry at you?
No, no, really? Why would you get angry with me? So it was definitely other people, but it kind of brought up this question mark. Like, do you know that you don't show anger?
And I think I did know. I think I was really, really afraid of anger.
Mm-hmm.
I was certain anger would push you away, because I saw small things like saying that hurt my feelings push you away. So therefore a big thing would certainly push you away.
Yeah, we did disconnection.
And I would rather at that time have stayed connected than being authentic to how I felt, which is really sad. And unfortunately, I think a way that many people stay stuck.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that oversensitivity.
Well, I, kind of like when we see our strengths becoming our challenges, right? I love how sensitive you are. I love how deeply you feel. I think it gives you a great ability for empathy for others. It makes you a great therapist in connecting with your clients. It gives you a great ability to see people. It was just hard in intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
I think intimate relationships was the one challenge to you being sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I see it as a beautiful strength and a great role model for men. How it was handled, I don't think was effective relationally.
At times.
Yeah. When we got stuck.
Yeah.
And I had to trust that you giving me permission to get angry would not have you abandon me. And I still didn't know how to do that, even though you had given me plenty of reason to feel angry.
Until you did.
And then I don't even remember the first time. Do you remember when
I remember getting in a heated argument in your living room.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if it was an argument. It was you yelling at me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, now I can think of a couple of times I really yelled at you. I'm not going to lie, John. It felt fucking cathartic.
And that was the point, right? And
I had to let it out.
I think that's one of the things I tell clients is that it's a beautiful thing to give people that you love permission to feel a certain way with you, to like angry, and then to really listen to the emotion behind their words and just say, wow, yeah, I can see where that really pisses you off, or I can see where that really makes you upset. And I'm really sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Yeah.
Because I think that's one of the few ways we have to get some of these emotions out of us.
Right. Well, I can tell you this. There were, I don't know, maybe 5 times where we really just kind of yelled at each other. And I'm not a yeller. That's never, ever, ever been my mode of communication. I think one of my absolute strengths is staying calm when really angry and having great emotional management when things would otherwise be obvious why I wouldn't. But there was something cathartic for me to have the permission to yell at you. and to let that anger out. Now, let me just say, yelling at each other was more about my anger. It wasn't name calling.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't cutting below the belt. I don't think there was ever like, I don't think I was mean when I expressed my anger. Well, he's kind of looking up. Okay, maybe I was. Maybe I'm over memory. My memory feels a little bit more in favor of.
It was anger.
It was anger.
It was raw. There's no filter, and you needed that.
I think I had never had that in 45
one of the things
years.
that was beautiful about it is it allowed you to get in touch with your anger for other relationships in your life, and it allowed you to set boundaries.
That's very true. Because in absence of me being able to fully express myself, I had a really hard time with boundaries.
Because we need that anger. We need that anger to let us know when people are trespassing on us or treating us badly or taking advantage of us. And we need that anger to motivate us to set boundaries and say, you can't treat me like this.
Yeah. I think I was for a long time a little bit of a doormat because I was allowing myself to be treated in a way because I was too afraid to speak up.
Well, you ain't a doormat anymore.
No, I am not. And this is one of the areas in which I feel our breakup really had immense purpose. And it wasn't just for you and I. It was truly a greater ability to access my authentic emotions, to communicate my authentic emotions, and then to be able to heal and repair so that I could feel authentic once again.
Well, and I think the breakup really worked well for both of us. I mean, it was not pleasant. It was, as you said, painful as hell. And yet it did exactly what it needed to do. I mean, I think we both got more real, more authentic. I think there was things that needed to be said that we were hesitant to say to one another because we didn't want to hurt each other.
Right.
And it bit us in the ass.
Right. So for couples who breaking up is not an option to do the repair, I don't want to prescribe that as a formula, but it again, it was what we needed. And I think the breakup was easier because we weren't married. We didn't live together. So it was easier to separate in that way without disrupting the whole apple cart of our family. But having the permission to allow yourself to really say what you need to say authentically, how it made you feel. And the other piece is, make a request on the back end around what you need to have happen in the future. So as you did your internal family systems to be able to talk yourself down when you were feeling activated and what was coming up for you, the next thing you did was when I did express myself, you did not go into explanations, excuses, justifications, rationalizations. That was not the time for that. Mm-hmm. And that is what also made it effective for me to express myself, because you simply allowed it to stay in what the emotion was. And sometimes your response was as simple as, thank you for sharing how you feel. I can see how you're really feeling. Thank you for sharing that. And with that response, I could say, thank you for hearing me. And that might have been it in that moment. And then we later could come back and you could say, hey, hon, I want to be able to follow up. And can I share with you, ask permission to make it, that softened startup that is so helpful in communication. But hey, can I share with you where I was at or what I was feeling underneath that? Mm-hmm. If you lead with that as a defense, my emotion then still gets dismissed.
Well, and to the listener, consider how many times in your lifetime you've been given permission to be angry, or your anger has been allowed by someone, and they simply listen to you and they hear how angry and hurt and upset you are. Mm-hmm. And then they say, thank you for sharing that with me. And they don't make a move to defend themselves or explain themselves at all. And for most of us, I'd say it's zero.
John, I had never seen that even happen. And even
I hadn't either.
In all my therapy training and all the work with clients, I didn't even know to guide that as a tool until you really showed up with that. And I mean, talk about humility in getting railed on and breathing through that and not getting angry and lashing out in return. And, the things that I was angry with you about, these weren't projections. I mean, these were actual things, right? It wasn't like I'm just angry and I'm unleashing on anything, right? I don't think I just, as you listen to
No,
this,
it's valid.
I want to make a difference between someone who just has an anger issue
Yeah.
and is spewing anger for no reason.
So,
totally different. I mean, we're talking like you did something to hurt my feelings and I'm angry about it and I'm expressing my anger back.
Or like, I forget the word.
Projections.
Displacing.
Yeah.
The anger, like you get angry at work because your boss yells at you, and so you come home and yell at your spouse. Like,
right.
That's not what we're talking
about.
No,
that's not at all what we're talking about. This is like actual instances.
Direct correlation, 1-to-1.
Right.
I did something, you were hurt and angry.
And I think it took me a long time. Once we started that dynamic, it's still, and I can think of something somewhat recently where I was still like, oh, should I say how that felt? Because I think, it takes a while to rewire those old patterns.
Well, and one of the things that's interesting, so we had those 4 or 5 kind of what I would call arguments, like fights.
Right? Yeah,
like
they were fights.
Intensity anger, sure. Which before that never happened, and it really hasn't happened since.
Mm-mm. And you and I have talked about this. I don't see that's ever going to happen like that again.
I don't see it happening. Because I think we got out what we needed to get out. We needed to get that raw and that vulnerable. We needed to share that emotion. And once it's done, I see it as behind us.
Right. And so, I think the challenge for couples, and we know this from the Gottman's research, that most couples wait 6 years of issues in their relationship before they come to therapy.
6 years too long.
6 years too long. And oftentimes by the time they come in for therapy, they are already committed to their narrative. And their pain is so hurt that they either don't think it's possible to get out of that dynamic, or at that point, they don't really want to get out of that dynamic, or they feel like, I've been holding on to this for so long. And that's even the stuff I've been aware of.
Yeah. And I see, you're absolutely right. I see them, so many couples, as unwilling or unable to drop their anger and the mask that they're wearing and the interpretation that they have and the blame that they have towards their partner. And the thinking there when we're angry is, if you just stop being such an asshole or a bitch, I wouldn't be so I wouldn't be so pissed off.
Right.
And that thinking doesn't work.
No.
Because we got to look at what's my part. I've got to look at what's my part in this drama, in this play. Mm-hmm. And what can I do differently? How can I show up differently to help interrupt this pattern, this dance that we're in?
Right. And it takes awareness. I mean, that's back to what we were saying a few moments ago. And we know and I think we may have mentioned it in one of the other episodes, but what's the percentage of people who think they're aware?
95%.
And what's the actual percentage of people who are self-aware?
12 to 15.
Yeah. So this is an invitation to look at yourself and look at the challenges you and your partner are having. And how might you name those challenges only by owning your piece in it? That would be huge.
When having the humility,
to
say you don't know, or the humility to say, maybe I'm a little bit wrong here. Maybe I have something that I could change. Maybe I have something that I could work on. Maybe there's something I need to learn to do differently.
And at the very least, I think the humility that, and I see this a lot with partners. Well, that wouldn't hurt me. Why did it hurt her?
Pardon me. It doesn't matter. Like, there's no right or wrong to feeling. There's no right or wrong to emotion. If it bothers your partner, if it hurts your partner, that's all you need to know. Mm-hmm. And you got to address that emotion.
We were talking with a couple this morning in one of our couples coaching sessions, and one of the partners had said something like, I don't know if this is the right emotion I should be feeling right now or not. And I kind of cut her off and I said, hey, if you're feeling it, it's real. Like, there's no right or wrong. There's no should in a dynamic around, well, I shouldn't feel this, so therefore I'll shut it down.
One of the worst things you can say in a relationship is you shouldn't feel that way,
mm-hmm.
or you don't feel that,
mm-hmm.
or you didn't feel that. Like, that to me is way out of bounds. Like, that's going down the wrong road.
Well, and also things like, how could you even feel that? How could you even think that? I mean, honestly, that's gaslighting. It's someone telling you that your reality is not your reality.
And you don't have to agree with how they feel in order to help them deal with it.
Right.
And help them let go of it.
And
it's not about agreeing.
No, and I think that's one of the disconnects so many couples have of feeling unseen, is they don't like what their partner's feeling. And so they're dismissing it. Either they wouldn't respond in that way, or they don't like that that's the reaction their partner is having. So they can't have room to just hear them.
And so I think we have to work to radically accept our partner's emotions, whether or not we agree with them. Doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. I think that's really, really so much of the barrier to communication is, if I would have gotten angry with you for the things you were feeling sensitive over, how's that going to ever help?
Right.
If I honor what you're feeling hurt by, or what is, coming up as a sensitivity, then you're going to feel acknowledged.
Well, and one of the things I think a lot of men do, and I guess women can do it also, I just see it more with men, is that narrative of, oh, she's so needy. And had I believed the narrative, your narrative that you told me that you were needy, again, takes us down the wrong path.
Right.
Because then it's a really quick and easy jump to, oh my God, she's being emotional again.
Right.
Oh my God, here we go. Here come the waterworks.
Right.
And the eye roll. And the impatience.
And the dismissiveness.
And dismissing it. And then you feel unheard, unseen, invalidated. And then the resentment builds.
Well, and we love that quote of, if it's hysterical, it's historical. So if anyone is disproportionately reacting with emotion, understand there's something there that came long before your argument or your hurt feelings with your partner. Right. Like, the bigger the reaction, the longer you've been holding it inside your body as a wound. So one of the things that, when I first start doing work with couples, one of my favorite questions to ask on the get-go is, do you know your partner's deepest wounds, insecurities, or sensitivities? And I love that question because it helps give me insight into how aware they are of their partner's inner emotional world from a painful standpoint. Ideally, we know our partner's deepest wounds and insecurities, and we do our very fucking best to not activate them, but especially when there's challenge, to not hit below the belt to say what's going on there. And I would say about 50% of the time, couples do know their partner's deepest wounds and insecurities, or fears, or doubts, or sensitive spots. And 50% kind of don't have any idea. So that's a great place to start. If you guys find, you are getting stuck in communication challenges in which you're getting hurt, begin by exploring. Do I even know what's at the root of my own sensitivities or pain? And do I have an idea of what my partner's is?
Well, and can I bring it up a little bit more to the surface,
please,
to a lighter level?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because one of the things we talked about with this couple today was my need to nap.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's one of the ways that I restore, I find rejuvenating. It's a reset for me. And I've done it all my life. And actually it's from my family of origin. And when I was married, my now ex-wife would get upset with me for napping. I don't really know why, but that was,
she probably had a to-do list of things you should have been doing.
The dynamic that she was upset with me. And being in relationship with you, it's 180 degrees different, because you're very supportive of it, knowing that by giving me permission to nap and rest, you get a better version of me when I wake up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's one of the things we're really, really good about, is encouraging each other to rest. Yeah. I don't see that in couples very much at all.
No. I've seen with clients of mine where one gets up early for work, with, like, in this particular one I'm thinking of, one was in the fitness industry, and the other person, he was self-employed as a consultant and really had time as his own structure for his workday. And he liked to get up and watch the Today Show and drink his coffee and read the news. And she was up at 5 a.m. and then would rail on him for, like, you're being so lazy. And he's like, I don't have to be up at 5 a.m. for work. And I created a business life in which I got to create my structure of my morning. So why are you getting mad at me for what works for me?
Well, and I like it in our life. I like it when you get up slowly, and that's your preference.
Right.
And so I support you in getting up slowly, because I know that works well for you.
Right. Yeah. I can't just shut off and go to bed, and I can't wake up and just pop out of bed. I need some downtime at night to unwind, and I need some time to wind up in the morning.
On accepting those individual differences is key.
Yeah. And I even have an example from about 2 hours ago. we're in the midst of, moving in together, or John's moving into my house, and this requires a lot of,
Our house, honey.
oh, thank you. John's moving into our house. I know I've been correcting him when he says my house. So thank you for that correction. It is our house. And I got this bug up my ass to go deep dive into some cleaning out of the garage earlier. And that wasn't on the agenda for the day. And in the midst of it, John had said, I'm going to go inside and go ice my back. And that could have been one of those moments where couples in another dynamic would have gotten
if I'm working, you need to be working.
I'm not taking a break right now. What gives you the right to go take a break? Well, why would I micromanage what I know John needs to do to take care of his back, which often gets sore? That would not serve anything if I were to judge that, criticize that. The best thing I can do is support that. And we don't see a lot of couples supporting that level of self-care, whether it's a nap, taking a break, icing your back. And that's also having the courage to speak up for your needs. Because it could have been very easy for you to feel, oh shit, she's in this deep dive. I've got to help her out here. I don't want to tell her how I'm feeling, that I need to go take a break. What if she were to get mad?
Well, and prior to that, we had talked about recording it too, right after my client. And I come downstairs and I find, oh, she's in whirlwind mode. She's cleaning out the garage. And so rather than like challenging that, I just went with it.
Right.
And tried to help you out as much as I could.
And I appreciated.
I didn't feel
that was not I didn't feel like doing it either today. It just kind of,
I was tired. My back was sore. And I was like, well, I guess this is what we're doing right now for a couple hours.
And I think that's a very simple, everyday, real life example of, can we be flexible? Can we support where our partner's at? Can we not judge? Can we not criticize? Can we speak up for what we're feeling and what we're needing? And then can we respond effectively to that? I don't see couples doing it. I really don't. And that example of the garage today, or you taking a nap, is little things, but it's those little things that we need to do on a daily basis to feel like, oh, my partner sees me. When is the time to challenge it? But when is the time to support it? And, it starts with the awareness of knowing what you're feeling, and then having the courage to communicate it, and then receiving it well.
And part of it is emotional awareness and empathy. Like, I knew when I saw you in the garage, I was like, uh-oh, like she's a little bit spun.
Yeah.
And you were frustrated.
I was.
And
I was trying to solve a bigger problem, and it just became a bigger problem.
Became more problems. And so I decided to just try and pitch in and do what I could.
Yeah. And I greatly appreciated that. And so I guess, there's a lot of things that we talked about in this episode that I think are really, really valuable. So to recap some of it, the biggest one,
naps are important.
To recap, I don't like naps, but I don't judge John's naps. The power of expressing your anger and the power of receiving your partner's anger. Now, this is a bigger question, and maybe we'll have to go in deeper into this, of when you can't receive it because it's really getting to a point where it's getting derailed, and what are the guardrails around communicating anger. So perhaps, you and your partner can talk about, wow, how do we talk about our anger? Like, let's be a conversation. How do we talk about our anger? What are some guardrails we want to put on it? I don't think you and I have ever name called an anger. I think that's a no-go zone, because those are things you just can't take back.
We're also pretty good about not kitchen sinking.
I think, yeah, absolutely. Kind of keep it to what's in front of you. And as I named earlier about knowing your partner's deepest wounds or insecurities, do your best not to hit below the belt. Mm-hmm. Like, really just own your emotion versus inflict pain on your partner. There's a difference.
And then also, I think, the idea of learning what your needs are, identifying what your needs are, and they can be a variety of things. I need a hug. Can we have sex tonight? I need some food. I need some time alone. I need some time together. Like, there's all sorts of different needs that we have, but to have the courage to practice stating them and seeing how your partner responds. But then also, if your partner is trying to share their needs with you, to really work on receiving them well, and being understanding and compassionate and giving.
Yeah. This seems so simple, And it's really much more complex work, I think, within couples. And then especially the challenge is finding the time to even talk about this, right? I mean, most couples don't do check-ins. Most couples are having transactional conversations, especially when it comes to, if you're in the stage of raising kids and taking care of so many of the domestic duties and chores and careers and families. I mean, it's a lot. So while there's not easy time to attend to this, I would say it's critical to attend to it. If you want a more connected relationship, which I've never met anyone who doesn't want to feel connected. I mean, I'm sure there are people who really don't desire it, but at some level, if you're in a relationship, my guess is you want to have some sort of connection. And this is one of the ways to really deepen and create more authenticity is when you allow and give permission for any emotion to be real, valid, and true without criticism or judgment, and have more conversation about how you feel.
That's a good summary.
I think it's a good summary.
And that's it for this episode of Love Isn't Enough. So stay curious on your journey.